Hey for welcome to another writing lesson. Today we are focusing on editing and revising. So I'm hoping that you on Monday continued on with a story that you had to choose from, given an orientation and a given problem and a solution. So a three to choose from. Hopefully you chose one and that you're nearly finished or hopefully finished that story. So today we're going to focus on editing and revising. So what I'm looking for is that you can look for spelling errors and fix them up. You can edit for punctuation. You can substitute words, which is swapping out words to improve your story, and add or remove parts to improve your story. So the first thing you're obviously going to need to do is finish your story if you haven't already. It doesn't need to be super long, just a really good detailed and descriptive story. Remember, when we edit and revise, we can use cups and arms to help us. So I've got some slides to help us with that. When we can add adjectives, adverbs, or adverbial phrases to describe what the character is doing as they speak. For example, "I'm hungry," groaned Mrs. Lobie as she held her stomach in hunger. So that's an adverbial phrase, as she held her stomach in hunger. Or, "Shh, be quiet. We don't want to wake him up," they said as they creeped up the stairs slowly. So we can describe what they're doing as the character is speaking. So you might add some of those phrases in. We can remove any words that we don't need. You might find that you've repeated something you've already said. I've particularly found that in some of your writing, you say who said it at the start and afterwards, but we only need to say that once, so you would remove those parts. You might move some things. For example, you might mix up how you're writing your dialogue. Rather than talking, he said, all the time, talking, he said, or he answered or responded. Mix it up. Have it at the start. He questioned, "I don't know," rather than "I don't know," he questioned all the time. And substitute. This is one I'm hoping that you guys will really nail on the head, where we're swapping out words to make the writing better. You might change adjectives or verbs to make the story more exciting. I'll add in those slides of those posters where we can change the adjectives and adverbs as well. And particularly looking at synonyms for the word said. So not just using said all the time, thinking of other words for that. You might like to revisit the Padlet that you worked on last week to get some ideas for that. When we edit, we can look at cups. So we're looking at capital letters. So remember, character names need capital letters, proper nouns, titles, days of the week, months, etc. We need to make sure that our sentences make sense, particularly having verbs in past tense. That's a common error. It needs to be in past tense, our narratives. Checking our punctuation. So we need to make sure we've got all our full stops in the correct place, commas in the correct place, and particularly our punctuation for dialogue, which I've got a little slide coming up, and spelling, fixing up our mistakes. So there's this table here to revise how we punctuate dialogue. If you look at the bold, there's some examples. But what we're going to do now is have a look at an example narrative that we're going to fix up together. So I've got my little poster on the side here, and this is an example part of a narrative. It's not right from the start. I'm hoping my video is no longer showing because my face is very close up to the screen while I'm using my stylus and I've flipped my laptop. So I'm going to read through it, and I'm going to keep in mind the arms and the cups as I go. So I'm looking for capital letters, spelling errors, things I want to add, things I want to change, etc. All right, Russell groaned. His mum shouted up the stairs. Clearly missing a word there. Russell groaned as his mum. There, that. Don't want to move it. Groaned as his mum shouted up the stairs. "Russell, get up now or you'll be late again." "Right," he called back wearily. "It's always the same." All right, I need a capital letter for my start of the dialogue, start of my speech. "It's always the same," he thought. So, comma. So this is a split speech. So you can see here there's starting the talking here. And then there's the adverbial phrase in the middle, he thought, and then just when you're warm, and he's got more talking there. All right, let's keep editing. So it's always the same, he thought, just when, and that actually doesn't need to be a capital letter, that can be lowercase. Just when you were warm, comfy, and having a fabulous trip. What was that? Russell's train of thought was interrupted by a small figure running by. Now, I might add more detail here. Rather than running by, I might add extra information. Running across the bookshelf. It was only there for a second, but he was sure he'd seen. But he was sure he'd seen something. So you can see here I've missed some words, but I'm also adding detail. Russell shook his head in an effort to reboot his vision. But no, there it was again, this time climbing up the leg of his desk. Maybe I could add an adverb in here as well, climbing sneakily up the leg of his desk. A small person climbing the telegraph pole upright. Doesn't make sense, does it? There it was again, this time climbing sneakily up the leg of his desk. I might remove that part. That doesn't really make sense, does it? All right, capital letter for Russell. Russell felt no fear, only curiosity. It occurred to him that maybe he was A, dreaming, or B, going slightly mad, but he decided, I might need to put a comma there, but going slightly mad, but he decided that having an imp or a pixie in his room was far more interesting than getting dressed. He approached slowly, much like when he was trying to catch his rabbit to put it to bed. All right, now he's thinking to himself, he's talking to himself, so I need talking marks, mustn't spook it, comma, close talking marks. He whispered to himself. Oi, who are you calling it? Said a tiny voice. He wasn't exactly like an elf, come to think of it. The boy, Russell was fairly sure it was a boy now. Now, this is the wrong type of fair. We need this type of fairly sure it was a boy now. Had thick dark hair which he wore long and free. Like a girl, Russell thought. Now this needs to be lowercase. Actually, no, it doesn't need to be uppercase. Like a girl, Russell thought. He wore an all-in-one suit made out of what seemed to be a flexible, now I've spelled flexible incorrect, flexible, smooth tweed. Russell wondered if it was itchy. He had a utility belt holding tiny tools, a hammer, pliers, a screwdriver, and some wire ties, all perfect minuscule replicas of familiar items in Russell's dad's toolbox. Now we need a apostrophe there because Russell's dad owns the toolbox. On his back was a rucksack with what Russell presumed was his climbing gear. Inside it, gear is misspelt. On his feet were a pair of boots which looked like leather gloves but for feet. There was a separate, now separate looks correct, but this is something I always get wrong. It's AR, separate. Section for each toe, 5 toes, though, Russell noted, same as me. The eyes that were now looking at Russell expectantly were deep brown, almost black, and the elf skin was shiny, soft-looking, and a deep mahogany colour. Now, this is pretty descriptive. There's lots of adjectives in there already. I only added the one adverb. I didn't have to replace any synonyms for said. It's got called, whispered, thought. So that's looking pretty good. So there you'll see that we've edited and revised. I've added a little bit of information. I've removed some things. So you'll be working on the same. What we want you to do today is upload your writing to OneNote. So you'll need to take a picture of what you've done so far into your OneNote. I'm trying to get it up for you, but the slide is not changing. That's okay. So finish your writing, edit and revise, use a different color to edit and revise, and then upload a picture to your OneNote.